Hi, and welcome to this session. In this session, we'll be talking about choosing the correct chart for your Power BI report. But of course, everything is, of course, relevant to other BI tools as well. But as Power BI is currently the #1 BI tool, we will be showing those examples in Power BI. So charts are supposed to answer questions related to data. So we took one of the frequently used charts in Power BI, and let's see if we can answer a couple of questions. So, is my sales performance good or bad? Yes, we see that there's a breakdown by business units here. This is a simple tree map, but we do not get this information. So is it better than previous year or worse than previous year? How good or how bad? So how much did we deviate from our plans, from our targets? We do not know. Okay, again, so why was certain business units underperforming or overperforming, or did we strictly move in a better direction on particular one? And then, of course, what are we going to do about it, right? We do not get this information. The next question would be maybe that we need to answer, what are the sales of speakers, right? Do we get information from such a chart? We do not know. We see it in comparison to other categories here, but apart from just a rough estimation, we cannot understand what is going on. Is it, of course, better than planned or worse than planned? Again, we do not get this information. Next, maybe has sales in this particular unit, so baby care, grown since last year or not? It's a blue color. Does it mean something, or is it just there for a randomly assigned color? So for how much maybe did it change? Why did it change? Again, we do not get this information. So what's the trend of sales in tablets? Again, and so on and so on. There are many questions that this visual does not answer. It does offer a rough breakdown by business unit, but that is it. Many colors, lots of space used, but poor in insight and nothing to drive action, right? So such charts lead to more questions than answers and leaves much to be desired in terms of being an efficient chart. So, according to Jacques Bertin, one of the really important authors of the field of data visualizations, an efficient chart requires the shortest period of perception in order to obtain a correct and complete answer to a given question. This is especially important when you're creating reports for management and people that do not have a lot of time. All right, so I'm Mark, and I'm a BI consultant at Zebra BI, where we focus on business data visualization, specializing in advanced Excel and Power BI custom visuals for financial reporting. However, the visuals themselves follow best practices of data visualization and have seen wide adoption in other areas as well. So the agenda for today would be to go over the guidelines and see the visualization wheel on how to choose the correct chart. We'll go over a 3-step tutorial on the fundamental principles that we should ask ourselves before choosing the visualization type. We'll also see how a comparison between best practice and we'll also talk a bit about chart junk and how to avoid it. And we'll use the Zebra BI Chart Selector tool, which will help you in your choice of charts. Lastly, if we'll have time, we'll also show how we can quickly build an actionable dashboard using those particular charts. So in BI tools, we have a lot of chart options, but as we saw, not all of them follow best practice of data visualization. So in Power BI, we have all sorts of options, and on top of the native visuals. So if we just take a look at here. On top of the native visuals, there's more than 300 custom visuals in the AppSource marketplace. And you will also find Zebra BI visuals there. So the question is how to choose the proper visualization, right? To help us understand how we should approach the selection, let us borrow Alberto Cairo's visualization wheel with opposite functions. So on the right side, you'll see the functionalities or functions of charts that are more related to infographics, art, and entertainment. And on the left side, you'll find functional, efficient charts that should be used in BI and reporting. And why is this important? It is important because you have to know who your audience is and which charts to choose, right? Because if we take a look at all those different categories which are opposite inside one to another, right? In business reporting, we do not need our charts to be original, right? We need them to be clear, familiar, and something that we already know. We do not need to be for them to be exact representations of the actual data, right? We do not need art or in really high detail. We also don't need decoration that is unnecessary, that does not bring us functionality on the other hand. And we do not need triviality. We need something or lightness. We need something that is high on information density. So this is really important when we are trying to understand who our audience is, right? Because what kind of visualization do managers require? So for our purpose, we'll focus on the management because they're the primary audience for business intelligence. And as said, what kind of visualization do they require? We would say they need the visuals from the left side, right? You will not deliver some really new type of chart that has never before been seen, but is really, let's say, has a lot of different new functionalities that are not familiar, right? Not, as you said, not the complete real representation of the actual, let's say, used in art and so on. Decoration and unnecessary use of colors is not necessary, and of course likeness is trivial. But we need them to be understandable and actionable, and for this they need to be information rich with dense. They need to be truthful and functional, properly labeled. As said, they need to be abstract, and they need to be consistent. This is really important. So functional, familiar, consistent, dense, and quickly understandable and actionable. Okay, so what are those types of charts? We have prepared a chart selector tool that is essentially a taxonomy of business charts based on three specific criteria. And this is the orientation of the chart, the task that it should do, and the shape, right? And the variations with multiple charts. So based on those criteria, we separate them by charts with vertical axis and charts with horizontal axis, and they are separated by this, let's say, categories of structural breakdowns for vertical axis and time series for horizontal axis. And then the tasks they need to achieve. Do they need to compare? Do you need to compare between different data points? Do you need to showcase the part to the whole, or a serious comparison between two or more series? Do you need to showcase and analyze the variance? And this is really important in performance reporting. And then you have also the ability to show integrated variances, so to show the gap that is actually important in that particular volume of the data represented. And also how to show the correlation between different elements, or how the contribution actually was achieved. And as said, you can have multiple versions of those charts, which can be then separated into, again, extended and combo charts and small multiples, which actually help you with the scaling problem. And this is really, really important as well. All charts that you see here follow the IBCS standards, and I highly recommend you check the session from Jürgen Feist on this topic, which he already presented on this summit. Notice that there are no pie and tree map charts. So anyway, we will return to this tool later, but let's first see how to follow the three criteria, right? So the three-step tutorial, how to choose the right chart. We said for the first one is the orientation. So are we presenting, let's say, time or structural data? Then, of course, we want to see what is the key task that such a visualization should achieve, or what is actually the key message that you want to present. So if you have a really maybe tiny screen, what would be that key information that should such a visualization really help you? This will help you with the selection of this. And then lastly, of course, once the previous two problems have been solved, we can assign a shape to it and then choose between different shapes, and we'll come back to this later on. So the orientation, horizontal or vertical, this is straightforward. As usually when we represent time, we start with the horizontal plane and then we move from left to right. But this is not, but if it's not time, and this is where people usually get it right, wrong, I believe, is to use, if it's not time, you need to use a vertical axis for all other categories, such as products, countries, any type of category that is actually not time should be standardized as vertical. And in this way, you vastly improve the readability and consistency of the reports, and you prevent reading it wrong. So, and this is true for all types of charts. So line charts, column charts, wherever you're using, maybe even in column charts and so on, you can use them in a horizontal plane or you can use them vertical. But it is important on what we are actually showing, and in that particular case, we'll use those two situations. Also, as stated, it helps in readability and legibility of the different labels, right? Because when we have long labels and names and stuff like that, we actually we tilt the labels or we make them shorter, and this is like if you then have to tilt your head and so on to read them, and it's really a problematic thing even from that standpoint. Next would be the task analysis, right? So what's your message? So there are actually 5 components to this. So the comparison, the ranking, or the sorting by, let's say, importance or volume and so on. The time series and how to. But what is really important here? You need to think about your audience. What is the main KPI that is important? Maybe on a really tiny screen, what would be just that one thing that you would highlight or pinpoint? And this should really guide you in the selection of your charts. So just an example here of a contribution and time analysis, right? Here we have some website traffic and goal completions, and we see a contribution with the waterfall charts, right? We see the difference here and how it stacks up between previous year to our actuals by each quarter. But we also see time trends which are properly scaled, and for this we can use, let's say, a different type of charts, so area charts in this particular case, and it will give you the right idea. Or maybe another example where we're interested in broader trends, we can then, of course, use line and area charts across different areas. Okay, so once we've achieved that task of assigning the charts for what their purpose is, we want to think about the shape. So the bars, lines, dots, which is the appropriate type of chart, maybe for a time series. So are we focusing, we should ask ourselves, are we focusing on single values, or are we actually observing trends? So for single values, we should really be focusing on having, let's say, bin charts and bar charts, column charts, because then it's much more easier to compare those particular points. But when we are having trends, and we're much more interested in trends, and maybe have a really large number of data points, then line charts come in really handy. So on the scale of single values to observing trends, we then decide which charts to use. This can be in terms related to perception, but also in terms of coding what we are actually displaying. So we can use different chart shapes for different types. So for example, if we're showing revenues, we have a really wide column or bar. But if we are then showing percentages, right, we have a thin line, and this should indicate maybe a percentage. But and if we keep to this standardization, we'll of course have a much better understanding of what is actually shown. So what we actually do in Zebra BI, and we also do this in let's say, the absolute variances and the relative variances. So when we have percentages, we have thin lines, we have pin charts, but when you are actually presenting volumes and so on, you go with columns and bars. So applying those three rules will introduce standardization and avoid chart junk, right? And what is actually chart junk? So chart junk would be defined, and this is a quote from Edward Tufte, also one of really important people we're talking about data visualization, is actually a lot of ink that does not tell the viewer anything new. And we can all maybe remember the 3D charts and so on, and pie charts that are used. And pie charts, especially 3D pie charts, are completely useless. Why? Because humans have a better ability to compare the lengths, so heights and widths, better than areas, as this is our primary visual experience. And again, we are less precise when comparing areas and more precise when comparing lengths. So are pie charts chart junk? Yes, they are. And so can be said for the tree map. And to return to this original chart that we analyzed, we can see that we can also include tree maps in the chart junks, because it does not follow the structural guidelines, the rules, and it does not answer the key questions. So let's return now to the Zebra BI Chart Selector and see how you can easily choose the correct chart and avoid the chart junk by just simply applying the concepts from this chart selector and selecting the particular chart that you need in Power BI. So, okay. And you can find this chart selector. It's freely available on the zebrabi.com /chart-selector, and you can access it there. But there you will find this chart selection tool. And now we can see if we are interested in, let's say, a comparison or for time series, for example. You just simply click on that particular icon, and it should bring you to a page with a detailed description of when this should be used, in what particular cases, why it is important when comparing the two values to use let's say, column charts, and if you're comparing, let's say, more trends, which charts to use, and so on. So you have all those different options here. When analyzing, let's say, part to whole, again, you can go with the stack charts, but you can also use other options. So if we take a look at the stack charts, it will also give you all the particular options here that you can use. And with Zebra BI, you can quickly switch between those different options. And all of those options are IBCS certified, right? Okay, so you have these options of different, let's say, structural, time series breakdowns, task breakdowns, but let's try to analyze those tasks one by one and see how we can then use those, let's say, chart options in the chart selection tool to help us provide the right chart. Okay, so we're talking about the orientation. So in Power BI, you know that you'll find pretty much a lot of the charts are based on that horizontal plane, but it is much better to use for structure. You simply just tilt those charts in a particular to the vertical, and this would be a much better solution. Then the next one would be for the comparison, for the breakdown, the ranking task, right? You can always go into that particular chart and use a sorting option, right? So you sort by volume, and you simply sort it. In Zebra BI, you can just click on that particular column, and it will do the sorting for you. So immediately you'll see that it is much more legible, right? But then again, there are certain elements that we can still improve when we are doing those rankings. So for example, it is much better to display the labels than have the users have to calculate and look at the axis. So instead of showing the axis here, we can just simply turn off the axis, both axes actually, because we don't need the title of the axis here. Because we actually have it in the title of the chart, right? So we can have more space like this. We can also turn off the x-axis, and instead of that, we can display the data labels. So this would be a much better representation, okay? So next things that we talked about is comparison and trend analysis. And what you see here, we have the three different options of column charts, line charts, and area charts, and they are appropriate for time analysis. But there are certain things that we should also try to improve, right? In Power BI, because this is actually the area and line charts are actually untruthful, are misleading. And why is that so? Because if we just stack them one on top of each other, you'll see that. And let's just turn off the background here. Okay, you'll see that those actually data points do not align. Why is that so? Because by default, Power BI does not start with a 0 on the axis, and this we should really always make sure that we always start. So we'll start here with a 0. And also on the chart, on the area charts, to not have a wrong or misleading representation of the data, right? And again, we can use the column charts for comparing different data points if we're interested more in single point comparison, but line charts and area charts for if we have a lot of, let's say, if we want to understand trends in more detail, or if we want to represent a large amount of data points, right? It will better aggregate it. There's also, of course, the options of those charts with Zebra BI, which have all those things and the IBCS standards apply to them automatically, so you get additional insights and immediate formatting. And one key important thing is here that it will by default, of course, start with the 0 axis, but you also have the option of displaying a difference highlight. So an important data point that will showcase maybe deviation from the penultimate to last point, or maybe the point from first to last, and then the changes and so on. And you can also change the different, let's say, labels between percentage points and absolute variances and so on. Moving on would be, of course, understanding this in terms of all of our categories, right, with the small multiples functionality. And we know that the small multiples have also been introduced, luckily, into the native Power BI visuals. But there is one key thing and a lot of other functionalities lacking, and this is also the ability to have this top n plus others functionality, so you can also increase or decrease the others. So if you have a lot of categories, to just limit them and combine all the rest into this others functionality. And then you have the option of, let's say, inverting certain elements if you have costs and so on, and highlighting can be done in this particular view. And you can use different, of course, charts here. But the important part is that all those categories should be scaled between each other, so you can visually understand and compare them, right? And this is important. So it is important, if we're presenting multiple charts and categories, to put them on the same scale and with the small multiples, and allow them to be visually compared one to another. Then we have the option to switch between this to show part to a whole. So stack charts, right, so that we talked about. And this is also a good option of visualization when we're trying to compare, let's say, individual, let's say, categories to the total at the top, right? And we can use a stack chart like this. But it is important also to have a nice labeling and legend that corresponds to those individual stacks, right? Because if we just take a look at what the native visual has a problem with, is if we have multiple such stacks, we'll just create a copy of this visual and switch it to the native one, which would be this one, okay? We then have a problem with the legend, right? Because first, there's too many items here. So we cannot color code this and then understand, okay, which of all those, then we need to take into consideration also colorblind and accessibility people, because as we know, almost 8% of men actually are colorblind, and will have a really hard time understanding such a chart or seeing the different, let's say, shades of color. So it's much better to have the labels right next to the legend, right? Next, and this is problematic with all stack charts, is actually that we can visually only compare only the last element, but still it allows us to, of course, compare the let's say, part to whole in individual stacks and so on. So it's a good option in some cases, but it is much better to actually, when we're trying to understand, let's say, comparing different, let's say, stacks to one another, it would be a better option to use the small multiples functionality. Okay, so next of the areas that we can talk about and choose would be a contribution, right? And we can use waterfall charts for this, and this is a nice way of showing, okay, so how did each individual element contribute to the total or the bigger picture, or maybe even add hierarchies, so we have lower levels contributing to the higher levels, and we can expand and collapse, so we can really see how some value was achieved. But again, here are some limitations in Power BI. So we know that the waterfall charts will go against this principle of having structure in the vertical plane only, because the waterfall chart is only available in a horizontal plane. So if we need a vertical contribution chart such as this one, or even better, something when we need to add calculations, for example, in P&L statements, this is something that the native visualizations will probably fall short, and we will not be able to present those side by side. And what we see here is also an ability of an extended chart, right? So what we have here is actually multiple charts within one visual that are presented side by side. So we can see the contribution with actuals, with previous year values, and the comparisons, so the variances with those, all in the same visual. Next, we can talk about the series comparison, so the time, right? We can compare the times with line charts. Again, what we would need to do is here put in the 0 axis to make it truthful. But the problem here is that Power BI will automatically assign some colors, and we won't always know, or our audience won't always know what we're actually looking at. So solving this by using a standard, let's say, chart selection, where you don't actually randomly assign or just assign chart by chart, by visual, it would be a much better solution. And also we want to have the ability to showcase the differences between the comparisons. And for this, we'll talk about the variance, but let's first see also how we can compare the series for structures. So what we see here, again, is using this same principle. So we have the vertical solution for structure. Maybe if we also sort it here by our actuals, but again, we can also sort by one particular column at a time here. And we see that the important part here, when we are comparing, is actually the difference, right? And this is why we need to visualize the variances, and we can visualize them much more efficiently by using an integrated variance chart type. And this is something that we have in Zebra BI, as if we have the visual or a chart that has integrated variance, it will show it directly on the same column. And this is actually what we need to highlight and what is important to the end users. If we now make the visual bigger, it will then jump into this extended chart solution, which will actually then present the variances separately. And we can then, of course, add additional, let's say, options such as overlapped bars to showcase, again, the comparison between the actual values. But what is important here is that the extended chart is also scaled to that particular to the particular values, right? Okay, and when we're talking about the variances, we showcase that we can do this with those extended charts. We can also present it in a more compact way if we are lacking in space. So, and the same can be done, of course, in, let's say, the time structure. So if we are having a particular chart that we need to showcase the variance, we can expand it in such a way, and we can also showcase it by using standardized colors. So when we're going in a positive way, we use green colors. If we're going in a negative way, we use red. But it can be, of course, different if you need to have color blindness in mind and availability. So you can choose maybe even, let's say, the colorblind option and this will then switch to a different color scheme. You can assign your own custom color schemes, of course, but it needs to be consistent, right? So if we want to say, okay, let's say the positive variance should always be blue, you can also assign it because it goes into our corporate structure and so on. But we then need to make sure that the blue color is reserved for the positive variance and not for anything else, to keep the structure of the charts nicely consistent throughout all the reports, and have the key message for our end users. And an additional thing that you can do here is also allow the contribution of variances. So this can be either on the variances themselves, or they can be included with the totals in mind. So you can showcase the total values for previous year, and then see how the different, let's say, structural or time breakdowns or contributions have been adding up to the total value in this year, or maybe compared to plan, if we maybe just change the measure here, we'll add in the plan comparison and so on. Okay, so here are the key tasks that have been used for showing the message, but in more detail, you can find this on the chart selection tool. So if we need a particular chart type, so for example, if we need to understand the variance of time, if you need to see which charts to use, you just simply go into the chart selector tool and you choose that particular chart, where you will get an explanation of how to create this with Zebra BI. Of course, you can try to imitate this with the native visuals or any other visuals, but there are some functionalities that, of course, will not be possible, such as the difference highlights, such as multiple variances within the same chart, and such as consistent scaling between the different columns. And this is really important because if you include any type of visualizations into your reports, and you go to your manager, and then, okay, you show them this, but then the visualizations, and it's all nice, but they will come with an answer. Okay, this is really nice, but can you show this in a table? Okay, so if this is the answer that you get, it is probably not the best chart options used, and you should really maybe try to present the data more clearly. And how you can do this is to follow those particular principles that we just talked about. So the orientation, the task that the chart needs to apply. So what is the key message of the visualization? Okay, so the key message in this particular visualization would be, okay, so we see the variances displayed, and we see that we have actually been overperforming above the plan half the time, and underperforming the other half, right? And this is the key message here. So if we need to understand, okay, so how the contribution of different elements is contributing to a business, the key message here would be, again, okay, so the hair care unit or the audio unit is actually doing really well, but the computers or unit is doing really bad. So we should maybe investigate what is going on here, maybe with a further context that you can combine, of course, with the use of Power BI and combining different visuals on the report page. And this is something that we will address right now. So how can we combine all those particular charts that we are using here? Also, maybe the combo charts. So maybe if you're presenting two values that are not correlated to each other, right? They should, of course, use different scales, and they should be visually distinguished. So for that, you can use the combo charts. And again, when we're using, let's say, percentages, we can then use the combo charts to show the percentages as pins, and the actual values as bars and so on. But let's see how we can combine those different chart types to create an actionable and understandable report that will be better than a simple table. Okay, so let's jump into another Power BI example, and let's just start with a structural breakdown. So we'll start with the tables. Okay, we will go back to the chart selector. We see what we need to do. We need to compare the different, let's say, structures. So first thing would be to go to the structure, and we choose the column chart here, and the instructions here will tell you which charts to actually use for the comparison, and here would be a bar chart. So what we can do here is we just simply go back to Power BI, choose the Zebra BI tables or the charts in this particular case, but the tables are more suited for the vertical structural breakdown. So we'll just use the business units here in the category to create a structural breakdown, add our comparison. Okay, now we have nicely sorted values, and what we can do, if we need more information, we can go back to the chart selector. Okay, but I want to also see with the comparison, I want to see the variances. So am I interested on, let's say, the percentage variances, or am I interested more in the actual volumes? And you can just choose one of the variance options here. So for example, here, I would want to show the vertical variance, and what I can do here, okay, it gives me the instructions. If I bring in the actual values and let's say the plan values, I will get this variance display. Okay, you can go back to the chart selection. You go to the plan variances here and to the plan numbers, and you just simply place them in the placeholder bucket, and you will get those variances displayed. And again, you will see that as the visual is responsive, we can get those variances integrated depending on the size that we are using, but we can also manually enforce certain layouts. So for example, if I'm only interested in the variances, you can go into the chart settings and select maybe the integrated variance or just both the variances, and those will be displayed, right? But if you keep the responsive layout, you can then manually decide which values are actually important to you. Maybe you can change the actual values to numbers and highlight the variances and maybe sort them like this. You can also change this and maybe hide the plan or bring it back if you wish later on. But now we have a nice breakdown of the variances. If we want to see the contribution of the variances, again, we could go back to the chart selection tool and see, okay, I want the contribution. How can I achieve this? Okay, there is one option, but the instructions will tell me, okay, so I can go into that particular chart, and in this particular case, I can just select this contribution waterfall chart, which will show the contribution to the total, but you can, of course, show the grand total as well. And now I see the contribution of different values. If I have multiple such values and I'm really interested maybe just in the outlier, so the top and bottom ones, what you can do here as well is add in, by right-clicking on the categories, you can add in a top end plus bottom end functionality and select for, let's say, the variance from plan in absolute terms. And let's say I want to keep the top 6 elements, but all the rest will jump into this other structure row, and you can expand or collapse this. Okay. Next, if I need to have also a time or trend comparison with this contribution variance analysis of our structure or the business units, you can again use the chart selector. So you go into the chart selector, see which time series fits for you. So maybe you want to have, again, let's say, a column comparison, series comparison between 2 particular series. So maybe compared to previous year, and you'll see how to add, again, the same logic to showcase those particular options. And in this particular case, we'll use the Zebra BI charts because we're using the horizontal plane and it is best suited for time series comparison, but you can also shift the charts. So for example, if you want to have a particular, let's say, ability of the charts to display them vertically, you can also do this. So for example, if I had a comparison between structure and have it presented in a waterfall chart like this, it is better if you just flip it by using the show vertical axis solution. And you can also present vertical charts with the charts visual as well. You can also break the y-axis to see the variances more closely. But the charts is actually maybe even better used for time series comparison, in which case, instead of the business units, we would then just add in the months, and we'll have a nice option of the chart showing the contribution. But you can also switch between different chart types by using the chart slider in the charts. And again, this is all responsive. So if I make the visual smaller, I will get those integrated variances. If I give it more space, it will present more information with the variances displayed. Okay, so the last part that is missing, and an important part, is also the display of charts in for different KPIs, right? And you can also do this and use the same principles and charts to provide additional insights in the KPIs. So for this, you can use the Zebra BI cards, and you will find all those visuals on the AppSource. So just in the visualizations pane, you simply click on Get More Visuals, and under AppSource Visuals, you write in Zebra, and you will find those 3 visuals. So for the KPI displays, we can again bring in our, let's say, KPI visual. We start with, let's say, our actual values, and then we break it down by the KPIs, right? We have a nice placeholder here to tell us where the KPI should go, and we'll get the just particular numbers. But these numbers are just numbers, right? They don't tell us additional insights. They don't show us the trends. We cannot help ourselves with just the numbers to understanding what is actually going on with those KPIs, should they need our attention or not. And for this, you can just simply add those comparison values. So for example, a previous year or a planned comparison will add a particular chart in that particular space that the KPI allows. One thing that you will notice is that we have a KPI that is actually represented in percentages. So no problem if we need to show the percentages as well. We can just simply go into the focus mode and show that KPI as a percentage, and now we have it formatted. So focus mode of the individual card formatted as a percent, and now we'll have the card displayed as correctly displayed in percentages. Another thing that we can do with the visuals is invert the logic of the variances, right? So if we have, let's say, costs that needs to be displayed, right? We can go into the focus mode or invert a certain group of the visuals. So we can go into the focus mode here and invert the costs of the KPI so the variances are nicely displayed. And once we have this, we need to also take into account the scaling, right? The Zebra BI charts will automatically, with having the groups, so if we need to understand different, let's say, business units in correlation to one another, we can use the chart selector here by going into the small multiples, and maybe you want to understand the different, let's say, options that are available here. You can just place something into the group placeholder. So a structural breakdown, it will tell you then, and then you can use the different chart options here. So if we go back into Power BI and then try to understand, okay, different KPIs by groups, we can place them like this, and then we can invert the different, so the costs are inverted now. and so on. But by default, with the KPIs, we have the ability to assign scale groups. So for example, if we need to scale particular KPIs, but not maybe the percentages, we would do first, we would add in maybe a trend. So to have a different chart, we'll also add, maybe select here an area chart to differentiate the percentages, because we're more interested in the trends in the gross margin percentages, for instance. But then we'll assign a scale group to the rest of the visualizations. We'll also select maybe a column chart for the rest of the visualizations here. And we'll assign the scale group. And how to assign it? So we select the second option here, and we simply mark the KPIs that need to have the same consistent scaling to be able to visually compare them. Okay, and now you can use the cards to filter the rest of the visuals and see those contributions for different areas of those particular KPIs. The important thing is that now you have the consistency across your visualizations within the KPIs, within your structural breakdowns, and within the time series. So with that, hopefully your managers and the users that you create your dashboards will find them understandable and actionable. And this means that they won't be asking you again for just the tables and the simple visualizations, because these actually explain what is the important part of your visualizations. At this point, I would also invite you to try out the Zebra BI visuals. So go into the AppSource, write in Zebra BI, and you should find all three visuals with the certified badge. So this means that the visuals actually do not store or read any of the data, but they're only that you bring into Power BI. So it's also let's say security guarantee for the data, and it also means that all of the visuals work through the entire Power BI stack. So you should have no problem with exporting the reports and assigning subscription plans and so on. And they should also work across all the different visualization organizations and companies that require this Power BI certification or native visuals. So yes, please go and try those visuals. They are Microsoft certified. If you want to see the chart selector and use it, you are free to do so. Just go to zebrabi.com/chart selector. We also have all sorts of different help tutorials, Power BI examples that you can download from the webpage, and also more than already 36 hours of recorded material for webinars for different BI and visualization topics. And yes, hopefully you will learn something new. Now I would also go into the Q&A session to see if there are any questions. Okay. Okay. I see that Matej has already been answering the questions. So yes, please go, and Matej is also a member of Zebra BI, and he has been helping with the questions meanwhile. So yes, please feel free to download the visuals, use the Zebra BI Chart Selector tool, and hopefully it will, of course, help you with your visualization choices and make your reports actionable and understandable. Thank you.